Hey everybody, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I'm your host, G1, as always. I hope you're having a good week. It has been a decent one for me. Got a chance to see some friends this week and have some good discussions about the things going on around the world. I always enjoy that kind of time and enjoy those talks. Well, what do we have on the menu this evening for the show? We are going to be getting back to the UK this week as things have been, well, cooking pretty hard over there. And I want to get into more about the why of this and the need for this rather than try to really dig into like specific details of certain demonstrations and such. And in all honesty, it's because those details don't matter as much to those of us over here in the US. We don't necessarily know the towns. We don't know the situations that are going on in those specific places. So that's not really, we don't. It's not terribly interesting. It's the more of the overall conflict and an issue there that is really important, and also going into more about what the government is doing to the protesters. And this is going to sound a little bit like a repeat of last week's show, but again, it's quite important. So that is why I want to go into it again. It's the current thing, and it, like I said, I just think it's important. I believe, as I was saying to friends earlier this week, I believe that it's probably the most critical thing going on right now. Even though the political situation in the United States, I think what is happening in the UK is extremely important. I may have hit on some of that last week, but let me expand on it. I can't downplay that importance of this, because as goes the UK, so will go France. And if France and England are go, then Germany will not be far behind. And this is true for both sides of the equation, by the way. It doesn't matter which side is. Whatever happens in the UK will be replicated in France and Germany. Those governments, if the government comes down and the people roll over, then the governments of France and Germany will follow suit. They've already been doing that. As you've seen in quick succession, these countries are replicating the laws and things that they're trying to do to crack down on people. But if things go, well, let's say more favorably, they will either sink in succession or they will rise. Let's put it that way. Once things begin to roll in one of those nations, I think the others will quickly follow. So it's vital that progress be made on our part there, because when it goes there, when it goes in Europe, it will spread here. Again, either way it falls, it's coming here. Whatever happens there is going to get followed up on here. When these elite globalists believe that they've achieved something in one place, they will move to replicate it everywhere. So if the UK folds and collapses, you can bet we're going to see a duplication of that in other nations very quickly. Now, as I write this, I do not have a lot of news regarding specific protests that are going on there tonight. It's still probably maybe dinner time, maybe a little bit before dinner time as I'm putting this together, maybe a little after over there. So I don't really have a whole lot of information about currently what's going on. They're experiencing a storm front that's kind of blowing through and blowing across the whole country. So a lot of weather that's taking place there, and that's brought a halt to it, or a pause to it, and it's bought the police some time to recover. It's kind of put a damper on the turnout of some of the protest, except for Ireland, which as you may or may not have guessed is a wild card in all of this. I will say that there were many protests that were publicized in the UK that did not materialize, and this may have been somewhat of an error on the part of the, well, I'll say organizers. I don't know that there is a specific group organizing these protests over there, but they may have contributed to let's say some optics that didn't play well for them. Because what it looked like was that they organized these protests all over the place, and the police responded, and the Muslim communities responded. The immigrant communities came out in force in some of these areas with weapons, I might add, which they were not prosecuted for or arrested for, I might add. And the anti-immigration protesters didn't show up. And so in some circles that played as, well, you know, the police did their job. The police presence and the presence of the immigrants or the pro-immigration factions were enough to drive off the... Well, that's not really true. That's not what happened. Those protests were announced with no intention of people going there. It was announced with the idea of causing the police to spread out and thin themselves out and deploy all over the country and wear them out. But it might not have played that well, or, you know, in that way in certain circles, and so that might have been a misstep. But we'll have to see. Anyway, getting back to Ireland, if you had a chance to read the piece that Big Country put up over on his blog, which Pete linked to on the Mothership, you may have guessed what I'm kind of hinting at when I go there. But let's just say that things are rather different in Ireland due to the long history of conflict. The whole thing has been on a rather, well, a long halftime period in Ireland, which, you know, can start back up just as soon as the need arises. It's beginning to look a lot like the teams are taking to the field again, and things are about to kick off. But we've had some shakeup in the rosters for the teams this time around. It looks like it's going to be Catholics and Protestants on one team and the English on the other, and maybe the Republicans sitting out from the sidelines. When you can get Catholics and Protestants on the same team in Ireland, you know you've probably screwed up there. So it's entirely possible for Ireland to go off all on its own, and that may or may not influence these other countries. It's just kind of a different place. It's kind of a side theater to this larger thing. And in fact, it's actually already escalated there and moved beyond just simple protests. They've already began to see some baiting the police into traps. So it just whole different thing there. But that brings me to the real kind of meat and potatoes of the episode. I had an exchange on Gab the other day with someone who honestly was completely out of their league on this. But they expressed a comment that I'm sure a whole lot of law and order Republican types would be in line with, at least the gist of it, if not all the language that was involved in the post. But anyway, they said something to the effect of, you know, this rioting, this is not taking your country back. This is just rioting. It's just making trouble. And they tacked on some other things to this that I don't really, we don't want to get into on this platform. But in essence, what the poster was saying was that the right in the UK was being manipulated by the likes of Tommy Robinson to go out and riot, and that this was not really how real resistance was formed and how real resistance should be doing things. Now, there's a whole host of problems with that position, but this post that this person made, it garnered a response, and it didn't get the one that they were intending, by the way. Multiple people who are very well qualified in these kinds of things responded to them and said, no, this is exactly how it goes. This is exactly what is supposed to happen. So let me get into this a little bit because I think it was very educational. Now, there is a case to be made that Tommy Robinson is an agent provocateur. I think it's a pretty strong case. I don't really have a quibble with that. Okay, he is what he is. I don't know that he has an equivalent over here in the U.S. Maybe a Richard Spencer to some extent. But yeah, I think the case is to be made that he does things for his own agenda. And the poster may have even been correct in saying that the right is being agitated to do these things in order to give the government the cover or create the crisis that the government needs to act. But really that misses the entire plot of the program. And honestly, it doesn't matter if they're being agitated. This is like think of a self-defense situation. When you are presented with let's say violence, the response is to escalate the violence, is to go back at this person and go harder than they intended. So the response is, when the government cracks down, go harder. We've talked a lot on this program about how populations can be slowly boiled into tyranny. Slow, progressive heating of the environment is what they want. When people become uncomfortable, they will act, or at least they will support action. They'll be far more behind action if they see things as they will not be behind action if they see things as isolated events, or if they see this injustice as being directed at some kind of others, some people that are not like them, or some people that, those people are more radical than I am. I would never find myself in that situation. They're not gonna act if that's the way they see it. But when they see the crackdown happening to people who are just like them, well, they sit up and they take more notice of it. And they do become more acclimated to action and more supportive of action. And what we are seeing in the UK is a wave of unnaturally swift prosecutions taking place, accompanied by people being arrested for posting messages on Facebook, or even linking to footage of the riots on Facebook or X or some social media. These clowns in office over there are even suggesting that they should shut down social media in a crisis or in an emergency situation like this, and perhaps even file terrorism charges against people like Elon Musk and try to have them extradited. All because normal, everyday white people in the UK don't want their children to be attacked simply for being white. They don't want to be attacked simply for being white. Everyday, normal people go into the street to protest and demand that the government redress their grievances, and the government responds with violence, arrest, and unprecedented prosecutions. People who were arrested last week, think about this. This doesn't happen in the United States. People who were arrested last week have already had a trial and have been sentenced to long jail terms simply for protesting or for posting things online. Meanwhile, literal rapists and assaulters of perfectly innocent people, perfectly innocent victims, are out on bail awaiting trial for months and months and months. They're not being swiftly prosecuted. Oh, and did I mention that those attackers happen to be immigrants? This is the two-tier justice system that the people over there are demanding an end to. It's the two-tier justice system that is beginning, if not already in place, here in the United States. And until this kind of imbalance is presented to the average person in the country, and it forces them to take a real look at it and be presented with the information that they can really see what's going on, they will simply read or hear the headlines and not give a damn about it because it doesn't involve them. Oh, the paper said that this happened, or the website said that this happened. And that's all the depth of their knowledge of these situations. They have to get it shoved in their face and rubbed around. They need to understand that this is not just happening to others. It could easily happen to them. There were people who walked out of pubs who had nothing to do with the protest, walked out of the pub slightly intoxicated, said some things, and were immediately arrested. Oh, you're involved in this protest. No, they weren't involved in the protest. They were just leaving the pub. It can happen to anybody. Because the laws that are being put into place are so broad and overreaching, anyone who expresses any kind of information counter to what the government approves of, in even the most slightest way, even if it's unintentional, you can and will face criminal prosecution. That's what they're telling you. They've taken the gloves off. They have shown their true face. They have to be made to see this. People have to be made to see this. They just don't see the tyranny clearly yet. So what does that mean? Well, contrary to what the Gab poster said, we don't need less riots. We need more. The people need to be out on the street protesting and forcing the police and the government to show that true face. You have to force them to take off the gloves and go more heavy-handed. Because that's the only way that you will get any kind of public outcry and public movement. Now, I'm not a genius here, folks. This is not my idea, okay? I'm presenting you information. This is how the CIA took over Ukraine and countless other countries for the last 70 years. You agitate in the streets and provoke higher and higher levels of action and retaliation by the government until the people have had enough. At that point, you will have gained the thing that you need the most, which is mass. You need a mass of people behind you, either directly in the streets themselves or willing to hide you and your efforts if things have to go clandestine. Now, of course, there's going to be consequences for all of this. Some people are going to be caught up in the activity and go to jail or worse. We have a recent, very good example of that happened in January, right? January. It's the inevitable outcome of conflict. If you're not prepared for that or you think that is unacceptable, well, then you need to look at the alternative. People are either going to be rolled up in the process of winning your freedom and restoring your country, or they're going to be rolled up in the process of the tyrants crushing everything that you have, everything that you love, and everything that you will ever love. Either way, there's going to be loss. Now, I, for one, believe that the loss will be far less and over a far shorter period of time if we win. If we lose, millions will be gone and civilization falls. And I don't know how much more clearly I can make it, that we're in an existential conflict here. And it will follow on to our shores. It's already coming here. It's already happening here. We will see it more. This week, Kamala Harris picked her VP running mate. And there's a clip of him on a program talking about how the First Amendment does not cover hate speech and so-called misinformation. We saw a poll this week where 40% of Americans think the First Amendment doesn't cover that kind of language. Well, who gets to decide what's misinformation? Well, you've seen how that works. The government tells the big tech companies what it wants to censor, and the big tech companies do the censoring, and it's all nice and legal since it's not the government that's doing the censoring. At least that's what they told us, right? And our friends in the UK don't even have the First Amendment to fall back on, nor do they have a Second Amendment to protect the others. But the thing is that it takes a willingness to use that Second Amendment more than anything. In fact, I would guess that previously, the overlords understood that as long as you let us talk about things, we would have an outlet. And that's all that we would do. We never really felt like we had to go to the street and use the second, because we could redress our grievances, or at least we could have an outlet. We felt like we had a chance in court or whatever. And they never really felt like they had to worry so much about that other option. But this new school, they seem to think that they can't be subjected to insult and ridicule. And so they have to crush all dissent. And that makes things far more inevitable. They can't stand to be mocked. And we can't move until the discomfort has reached a crescendo. Well, the discomfort is accelerating. That is all I have time for this week. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab, Nice Crew, and the Dry Dock. And I will see you on the next episode.